Today's guest is Mack Story. He's a motivational leadership speaker and author at Blue Collar Leadership. All right, Mack, thank you for coming on the show.
Yes, sir. And I appreciate being on here. And you're doing some good stuff out there. So thank you, and don't stop. Keep making it happen.
Yeah, thank you so much. I know, of course, with all guests, our referred guests, I look at backgrounds and I see 20 books. I see, lots and lots of speaking. How did it all start for you?
Yeah, the speaking part and the book part, it was it, for me probably divine intervention, if you want to call it that. I don't know what coincidence, whatever somebody prefers, but basically a frontline coworker back in 2005 when I was still from 1988 to 2008. I was a frontline or I was a manufacturing worker, worked in the manufacturing industries. And first 10 years I was on the front lines as an entry level worker. Then I began working my way up. So by 2005, I basically was a lean manager over process improvement, that sort of stuff. And for the entire facility, we were one of 70 manufacturing plants, and I was supporting other plant managers and that sort of thing with lean transformation. And one of the quality technicians took my iPod and just to put music on there. He said he had access to his friend's computer or something like that, and he was going to put a lot of music on there. So he took my iPod, he brought it back, and he said, "Hey Mac, I put a business book on there for you." And this was 2005. I said, "Okay." I said, "What is it, Zach?" He said, "The Seven Habits of Highly Effective People." I said, "Well, is it any good?" He said, "I don't know. I ain't never listened to it." He said, "But my friend's dad, who owned the computer where all the music was at, talks about it all the time." And he just thought enough of me. It was just a 1 hour audio highlight. The whole book, probably 13 hours or so, but I didn't know that back then. I had never heard about leadership development, personal growth content, books. I didn't know there was an industry. I didn't know there was even one single book or one audio or one video. I had been just ignorant for my whole life. It's actually a bit embarrassing knowing what I've learned today, that I was so ignorant that I didn't even consider it or look for it. But the key thing was no leader in my 20-year manufacturing career ever introduced me to leadership development. Never recommended I read a book. Never told me they had read a book or anything like that. So anyway, I told him I appreciated it, and 3 years later, I resigned after 20 years, and I had led our lean transformation in that facility from minus 3% gross profit margin to plus 35% in just 3 years as a lean manager. And I started my own lean consulting company. And I'm driving around in the middle of 2008, or the fall of 2008, during a Great Recession. And I started my business with no plan, no customers, no clients, no idea. I was just passionate about leadership development. And so I'm driving around, all of a sudden, my music's playing. I had my iPod plugged into my stereo, listening to music, and all of a sudden a song went off and a guy started talking. I was like, what is this? Looked at the screen because it's telling me I had it plugged in so I could see what it was. And it said Seven Habits of Highly Effective People. And I flashed back 3 years prior and remembered Zach telling me it was a business book. And I thought, well, I'm in business. I ain't got any business. Maybe I'll listen to it. So that was literally how it started in 2008. And I've been reading, listening, or watching videos, audios, reading books, podcasts, whatever you want to call all of this stuff every day, literally every day since 2008. All I needed was an introduction, and that was the spark that launched me into this.
Yeah, Seven Habits is a classic. Not everyone has read it, but what stuck out to you the most out of that book?
Yeah, it's interesting, and I haven't spoken to you, and I listened to a couple of podcasts, but I didn't ever catch how to pronounce your name. Is it Tats or
Tats, absolutely.
Tats or Tots?
Tats.
Tots. Okay, so Tots. So so what stood out, Tots, was probably within 2 or 3 minutes, maybe 5 minutes. The most important principle I've ever learned since I've been reading every day and since 2008. He said, between stimulus and response, human beings have the freedom to pause and choose their response. It sounds so simple to just share that with you today, but that day it was profound to me. I had a very short temper my whole life up until I started learning this stuff about how to think differently and be differently. And I just thought I always shared that. I always said, my family always said it. Short temper runs in our family. But that day I found out irresponsibility is what runs in our family, not short tempers. We didn't know how to control ourselves. And but I hit pause on that stereo that day when he said that, and I thought about it. I said, "Is that true? Do I have the freedom to pause and choose my response no matter what happens?" And I thought about it and thought about it as I'm driving, and I decided I do have that freedom. I may not exercise it very well most of the time, but I have that freedom. So I let it play. I rewound it, let it play again. In tots, I did that probably 6, 7 times. I had to stop it, think about it, because I had a really, really bad temper, and it showed up everywhere. And finally, I let it go past that part. And he says, I was listening to audio, but when I'm speaking on stage, I know I use my hands a lot. And I say I could see him. He probably was on stage when they recorded it. But basically, what he said after that was being able to choose our response means we're response able. We have the freedom to pause and choose our response. It means we're response able. And he said that means we're responsible. When you slide those two words together, it means we're responsible. And I hit pause again and thought about it, and that's when I figured out we don't have short tempers. That ain't the problem. We're irresponsible people. And and I probably got angry that day 5, 10 more times, but I thought about it every time. And it's like a mind muscle. You got to develop it. So I thought about it. I listened to that 1 hour audio probably 1,000 times before I ever realized there was a whole book or there was another book of any kind. That was just because someone heard me talking about it, and they said, "I got a 6 hour version of that." I said, "You got a 6 hour version of this?" They said, "Yep." I said, "Well," and as soon as they said that, that's when my research started. Then I figured out that there's a whole industry around personal growth and leadership development.
Yeah, for sure. That's amazing. So, and when you listen to it over and over, is it to reinforce, soak it in? Because I like, certain things that I like listening to, whether it's music or personal development, I like to kind of play over and over, just to kind of find different ways to like, change mindset or whatever. But what was your logic around listening to it that many times over and over?
Yeah, it was just so interesting. At the beginning, I mean, still is. That's why I've been, reading different content every day. But at that time, it was so new, and I wanted more of it, and I couldn't remember it all. Obviously, I'd listen to it, but what I started figuring out is I was trying to apply it, in my life because the second most important thing I got out of that audio, he actually said first, but I didn't even pay attention to it the first time I heard it. But after I started listening to it, he says probably the second or third time I got this piece of it, and he said, if you truly want to learn this content, you got to start teaching it to others within 24 to 48 hours. He said that right at the very, very beginning, but I didn't even hear it, consciously at the beginning, not literally. I mean, literally I did, but it didn't register. And so that's why I started doing. I started teaching it. I started talking about it everywhere. So the more I would start to apply it and I'd talk about it, I started to learn just like that. The more I listened to it, I started to hear things I didn't hear the first time. Even though I literally heard it, it didn't stick. It didn't make sense. It didn't seem important. So that was part of the reason. I just kept digesting more of it until I really learned to subconsciously apply it. I hadn't mastered it. That's what I tell people until you've, listened to something or going to a conference, reading a book. I heard this from Myron Golden a while back on one of his YouTube channels. He says, learning about something is not the same as learning it. And he said that really so well because the way I say that is we can teach leadership in a room, but you can't learn it in a room. I can write about it in a book, but you can't learn it from reading a book. You don't learn it until you go out and apply it effectively, and until you can really subconsciously apply it, you haven't mastered it. So you still learning it, even though you may get it right sometimes, or you may not even apply it other times. So that's it just resonated with me at just a core level. I mean, it's sad to say I was 39 years old. 39 years of living, nobody in my whole life that I had ever come across, I apparently had heard of this either because nobody ever shared it with me or So that's one reason I'm so gung ho about doing what I do everywhere that I go. That's why I do podcasts, YouTube channels, LinkedIn articles, and newsletters, and posting on social media. It's just in me, and it just has to come out. So that's why I'm. It's a privilege to speak with you today about it.
Yeah, thank you. So you mentioned teaching it is the way to sort of bring it in and learn it as well. Um, so walk me through. Mac, you identified something you want to work on. Um, you have 20 books. Were those individual personal development projects, or like what? Describe to me your learning process.
Learning was for me is a bit frustrating, and actually, I've only got 15 books of my own, but my wife and I together have 34. So that may be where you got the 20. It depends on when you might have saw some content. Copy might have been old stuff, but yeah, learning for me is when I started figuring this stuff out. First thing I did was realize I got a lot of work to do on me in the mirror. But there's two ways to see that. First way that I saw it was I got a lot of work to do so I can be more effective professionally. And I started introducing it to the lean teams. Between 2005 and 2012, I logged over 11,000 hours leading lean Kaizen teams. Every Monday I get a new group of people. They were not a team on Monday; they were just a group of people, 6 to 8 people. And most of the time, they hated me, they hated change, they hated the boss. Sometimes they hated each other, and sometimes I hated life. I mean, it was rough, but I started introducing this along with all the lean tools. I would introduce leadership development first. First 4 hours, I call it priming the pump. I would introduce 4 hours on Monday, then 1 hour Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday to prime the pump. Get them mentally prepared to forget all that stuff and let's work together and let's make your life better and let's make your work better, your job better, and everything's better. And by Friday, they were a high impact team, high performance team. So anyway, I guess I'm saying that is to say that that's what I started working on first, how to be more effective at helping other people have a better life, helping other people perform better at work, have a better performance, me to perform better professionally. About 4 years into that journey, though, by 2012, I figured out there's a whole deeper level of this that's got nothing to do with anything but me. I got to work on me, and that's by that point I could see what I'm doing now as a possibility, a kind of a distant dream that one day I'd like to go speak and teach and write and do all that stuff instead of just leading Kaizen events, which I was very passionate about process improvement. But I realized I was most passionate about helping people have a better life at home or at work, didn't matter where. And and as I was doing that, I started realizing how bad my own life, meaning me within my life, was. And so how I learned was I just started picking out these character principles, like talk about something I wrote about recently. About being two faced. I like to talk about. I'll ask people, sometime when we're speaking for an audience, I'll say, how many of you want to raise your hand today and admit that you like two faced people? And nobody likes two faced people. I'll say, I don't like them either. I don't want to be around and associate with two faced people. I say, but if somebody tells you to do something, gives you some advice, but they don't follow their own advice, is that a two faced person? And I'll say, if someone tells you you shouldn't behave in one way and they behave in that way, is that a two faced person? I said, if somebody acts one way with one group of people and they act a complete different way with another group of people, is that a two faced person? If somebody uses one kind of language with one group and then a different kind of language with another group. So I share that because when I started reading this, that's the kind of thoughts I started having. Back then, those days, I drank alcohol. I stopped in 2012. I hadn't drank a drop since then. Part of my own, personal development growth journey. But when I used to drink alcohol, some people in my life didn't know I drank alcohol at all because I was two faced. I say I was 10 or 12 faced. I was all kind of people at all different times, just depending. And and so I got thinking about who I was as a parent. I tell my son he don't need to do certain things that I was doing, and that wasn't a good way to be. And between I only have one child between age 15 and 19, he hated me, Tots. I mean, He literally did. Rhea, my wife now, we've been together this year is 24 years, but she's my fourth wife. I got it wrong before a bunch of times, and I know what the problem. Most of the problem was me, and same thing with my child from that previous marriage. From 15 to 19, he hated me. When he was 17, I discovered this content. When he was 17, I that audio come on in my car that day, and I started working on me. Uh, not as hard as I did 4 years later, but I started getting better right away. And my mom started telling my son, "Hey, your dad's changing. Your dad's changing. You need to give him another chance." Because he was just staying with his mom. He didn't want nothing to do with me, during those years. And then my mom started reading these books. She read the Seven Habits. She wanted to know what was causing me to change so much. So she started telling Eric, my son, about my change. And then after she started reading, she could articulate it at a whole different level and help him understand. And finally, 2 years into my growth journey, he gave me that opportunity, and I was able to rebuild that relationship. And he actually started working with me pretty quick after that in my lean consulting business. And he had no experience, but he had started reading all these books that I had been reading, which made us be able to more easily rebuild that relationship because now we were starting to think alike. He's starting to be proactive. I'm trying to be proactive and stop being reactive and that sort of stuff. So that the I didn't start this journey to fix that relationship, but as a byproduct of it, once that happened, I started realizing this is some big stuff that I'm starting to interact with. These principles that I was starting to align myself with.
It's very good. Um, rebuilding what a powerful story about your family for personal growth as relates to professional, personal growth as it relates to personal. Is there stylistic differences? I mean, I've heard both. Some people say they're different. Some people say they're the same. Where are you on that?
I think I'd say both people can be right. It depends on the frame of reference because when you're talking about principles, the principles apply the same whether it's at home or at work. When you're talking about the practice of applying it, that may be different. And it's like I use the example, anyone can relate to. Just a lot of leadership folks use it, like gravity, right? Gravity is a principle; it applies everywhere. Once you learn it, how you apply it at work, depending on what work you do, may be different than how you apply it at home, depending on maybe even where you live in the world. Because some places, I mean, you're just living on flat ground. You ain't got nothing to worry about too much with gravity, unless you trip over something or you walk past a hole or you're up on the roof, that kind of stuff. But the principle of gravity doesn't change, but how you apply it changes. It's kind of like lean methods with, Toyota being the world benchmark with lean. A lot of companies they look at Toyota and say, what they're doing won't work in my company, and what they're literally doing may not work in your company. The practice, because you may not be doing what they're doing, but the principle that they applied to do what they're doing very efficiently and very effectively, that applies in every process. And so that's what I already had knew about lean, and that's one thing I learned about with leadership. Leadership and lean to me are very very closely related. Most people who really love lean really love leadership. Most people who hate lean seem to hate leadership. It's just the way it is. But that's what I would say. It's the how you apply it may be different, but learning the principle, like being reactive versus proactive. Being reactive at work, blowing up on your coworkers or blowing up on a customer or blowing up on a client or getting mad because of a change order or a revision to some process or some industry driven change. You become reactive about that versus being proactive and deal with it in a value driven way. At home, the same thing may be reactive because of some change going on in your life with your spouse or with your children or your finances or all that kind of stuff. But the principle of being proactive, taking responsibility versus being reactive, it's the same. So I don't know if I answered your question, what you were looking for or not, but that's how I see it.
Yeah, I think you touched on it for sure. But just to clarify, you mentioned gravity. In terms of leadership, what is gravity? What are the principles?
Well, there's thousands and thousands of them. So I'll give you an example of one. and I talk about this a lot, and it comes from the 7 habits. I mean, I didn't just listen to that audio. I transformed my life because of the 7 habits. I probably could teach you the 7 habits content better than I can teach one of the books that I actually wrote. Because I hadn't read my books over and over. Some of the stuff in my books, I don't even know what it is because I only thought about it the one time that I wrote it, and so I lost my thought thinking about those books. What was that question again,
Principles,
Tots?
gravity. Principles,
Yeah,
gravity.
okay. Yep.
Motivation.
So habit 5 of the 7 habits. It's the one I use when people ask that type of question. It's seek first to understand, then be understood. It's habit 5. So in today's world, there's a lot of, and there's nothing wrong with this at all. So I'm not belittling these people or demeaning them or think less of them. What they're doing is important. So there's a whole industry around, say, personality profiling, right? That's kind of like the practice. They're teaching, learn how certain person is and deal with them this way. Learn how that person is and deal with them this way. It could be just different types of professional people versus blue collar people, white collar people. It could be men or women. It could be different age groups, all kinds of different things that there's practices for. Like millennials was a big thing a while back, right? Everybody like how to deal with millennials and all this kind of stuff. And they teach all these ways to deal with millennials. But if you learn in a principle and you actually master that principle, you don't need to know any of the practice training because the principle will take place of it. And that's think of that principle. Seek first to understand, then be understood. That applies at home with my wife or my children. It applies at work with customers, coworkers, suppliers. Seek first. It applies if you're 20 years old or you're 40 years old or you're 60 years old or you're 80 years old. If when I meet you, I'm authentically coming across to you, and it's up to you. It ain't up to me. I just got to try to be that way, but it's up to you to decide if I truly am that way because it's about your perception. But if you feel like I'm trying to understand you, I'm gonna be in a position to build trust with you. But I got to do it first. I got to seek first to understand, and once you feel understood, it doesn't matter who I am. If I'm trying to understand you as a person, I come across as authentically caring about you as a person. I'm gonna be able to connect with you, and it doesn't matter what I look like or what you look like or where I'm from or anything like that. I teach about rapport. And that's another example. We talk about building rapport, and in simple terms, building rapport means you're trying to convey that I'm like you, so it's okay to like me. That's that's kind of what you're trying to convey when you're trying to build rapport. You try to speak at the same pace. You try to speak, kind of use the same language. If you're in a room with someone, you kind of sit like they're sitting. Maybe you dress like they dress. You try to kind of mimic them to some degree so that they feel comfortable with you. When I teach about rapport, I teach one principle. What I know about everybody I meet is they care about themselves. That's a unifying, uh, I guess, principle that people care about themselves. So what I know is if I can come across as I truly care about you when I meet people, if I actually care about them, I don't have to speak the same way. I don't have to look the same. I don't have to do all that rapport, the practices for people who are trying to build rapport. If I can communicate to you and you truly feel it that I care about you as a person, we're going to be able to communicate and we're going to be able to build a relationship. No matter if I get all the practices wrong or not. If I don't talk like you, it's not going to matter. If I don't look like you, it's not going to matter because you're going to be thinking this person actually cares about me as a person, wants to help me in some way. Definitely don't want to hurt me or damage me or manipulate me or any of those things. Are those good examples?
Yeah, absolutely. You talked about, yeah, truly care, and you gave a few examples. Um, I'm wondering if there's more. I mean, you said you basically really trying to understand, and I like that insight about, everyone cares about their, themselves, not in a negative way, but, basically everyone has a full plate of things that they need to consider, feelings, responsibilities. You have to somehow sort of understand them better in a way that they feel comfortable to share. Any sort of stylistic or practices that sort of it would help someone that says, well, how do I do that, right, without feeling like I'm intruding?
Well, I mean, one way you do it is with that habit 5, right? Seek first to understand, then be understood. If somebody feels like you're intruding and you truly understand them, then you're going to know that, right? And you're going to back off if you're actually applying that principle. For instance, I use that somewhat a little different spin on it. Sometimes I'll help people understand, though they can validate it. You can validate it. Most anybody that I'm ever talking to can validate what I'm about to tell you because they've done it. Even if they didn't do it on purpose, they got it right by accident sometimes. And I'll say, have you ever went up to talk to someone for whatever reason and they don't want to talk today? You can just tell they don't want to talk today. And you start to talk to them and they don't want to talk. So you get it right, whether intentionally or accidentally, and you say, "Hey, Tots, I can tell you really you don't feel like talking today. I'm gonna leave you alone." And by the time I say that and walk off, you turn around and start talking, and it's because you actually Mac understood me, and I expressed it, I reflected it, and I gave you that space. Hey, you don't want to talk today, Tots. I'm gonna leave you alone. And usually, though, what'll happen is you turn around, talk to me, start talking, then I turn around, start talking to you and start asking you questions. Well, what's going on? I started, doing the opposite of seeking first to understand. I start probing. I start trying to figure you out. I start trying to give you advice. And soon as you feel that, you turn back around and you don't want to talk like you didn't when I first walked up. Because when I truly understood you, I gave you psychological air and space. So that's what I have to deal with all the time going in all these different companies. And I tell people, because what I teach can help anybody, but it ain't gonna help them if they don't want it. It ain't gonna help them if they're not interested because they're not gonna do it. And if I'm trying to push it on to them, all it's gonna do is turn them away from me. So I'm never gonna be one to help them because they're not gonna like me because I'm trying to push something on them. And really, what I'm talking about here, underlying principle is, uh, you know, we talk leadership is influence. Learned that from John Maxwell a long time ago, and I believe it, and I talk about it, I write about it, and but he talks about also the foundation of leadership or influence is trust. And when I talk about it, I make sure I differentiate authentic influence versus artificial influence. Artificial comes with your position, title, your rank, your role, all kind of things. All that's artificial. That you didn't earn that influence. It's given to you by somebody who put you in a position. And so whenever I'm talking about leadership and I'm talking about influence, I'm talking about authentic influence that we've earned. And so when we talk about trust being the foundation of authentic influence, in my first book, Defining Influence is the title of it actually. It's subtitles Increasing Your Influence, Increases Your Options. And what I teach in there is what's the foundation of trust. Most people don't even understand what trust is. They know it when they feel it, but they can't really define it very well because they ain't never really thought about it. They worry about when they feel it or don't feel it. That's about deep as it goes. And so in my book, I knew I'm not going to be talking to you, so I got to break this thing down really deep to help you understand it. So what I teach is the foundation of trust is intention, and that breaks down into two components. So, like, if I meet you, and no matter what we're talking about, I'm meeting you for the first time. It could even be right here during this podcast interview with just me and you talking. If you feel in any way that I'm trying to manipulate you, there's going to be no foundation for us to build authentic influence. You may even cut the show off and cut me off like, man, you crazy. I ain't got nothing. We going to cancel this thing, right? You could do that. You got that power. It's your show. But and manipulation means I'm just out for my own benefit. You may or may not benefit, and I don't care because I'm worried about me. That's manipulation. Anybody who feels that way, whoever they're feeling it with, that person don't have a foundation to build trust. Never gonna have it long as the other person feels manipulated. But the other side of that equation is not really an equation, it's just a division of two different ways you go with intention. Is if you feel motivated. If you feel motivated, then that's mutual benefit. That's why you feel motivated. We're aligned around some values that we both share. I'm winning and you winning. I want you to win and I want to win, meaning I want to help you. That's the biggest win I get out of what I do is actually helping people. The ROI I get out of what I do is hearing people's stories about where they got stories like I do, where they made their life better at work and at home. So that's kind of how it breaks down. But you can't make somebody trust you. You can only choose to be trustworthy. But even that is still it's all relative. Like I'm choosing who I'm going to be. I'm wrapping myself around my values, and I'm going to attract people with shared values, and I'm going to repel people that don't have shared values. You can't please everybody, and that's the reason why is we've all got different values. We have to decide who do I want to be, and what do I value, and then I'll attract those people. And sometimes you repel people you wish you could attract, but you don't have those shared values.
Yeah, very nice. So you highlighted uh, one of your many books uh, on the topic. Is there uh, what are some ones that you've written? Because obviously there's a collection of all these thoughts besides the one you just mentioned already that really sort of stands out, or sort of, let's say, maybe it goes against the grain of what other people are talking about. I don't know, like what stands out for you with the body of work that you put out?
Uh, I guess it depends on which people when you're talking about goes against the grain, because some of it goes against the grain of a lot of people, right? But if you're talking about the folks in the industry, leadership development, personal growth industry, I think I really put a different spin. I got a book. It's actually right there. You can't see it, I'm sure, in the screen, but it's blue collar leadership and culture: the 5 components for building high performance teams. I talk about that really completely different than I've really heard other people talk about it. Some components, are things that other people talk about, but there's something in there called the transformation equation that my wife Rhea and I came up with. And
Mm,
we first shared the transformation equation uh, with a group of prison wardens from around the country who were going through a transformational 9-month transformational development program. Once a week, they would meet with somebody doing something related to transformation. And I've actually got a book called 10 Foundational Elements of Intentional Transformation: How to Become Your Best Self. But we wasn't talking about that one. We were talking about the culture book. And, well, actually, I hadn't written the culture book yet. We were talking about the transformation equation, which is what that book is based on. And anybody listening, if you want to see that, you can go to get the transformation equation.com and actually see that. And I'm about to tell you what it is. Basically, it's 5 components across the top, which is leadership development plus buy-in plus unifying purpose plus competency plus execution equals transformation. And we're talking about cultural transformation. And anytime one of those components is missing, we got that across the top, but then we got it repeated over and over with one of the components missing. Like when leadership development is missing. Remember, leadership is influence. So when leadership development is missing in an organization, you may have the other 4 components, but you don't get transformation. You get frustration because you don't have influence. When buy-in is missing, you get resistance. When unifying purpose is missing, you get confusion. When competency is missing, you get anxiety. When execution is missing, you get stagnation. When it's all missing, you got chaos, and a lot of people operate within the chaos. So that's what that whole book is written on. That I introduced that at chapter 6. Most of my books are 30 chapters, 3 pages each. So I interviewed somebody on my YouTube channel, Blue Collar Leadership YouTube channel. I got a series on there called Real People Getting Real Results. And it's people that I met, that I mentor, that read my content or listen to my podcast and are getting results in their life. And I got so many of those people. I created a series, and today we just released the 5th one. We do one every Friday at noon Eastern time. And one of the guys, I think he was the second guy that I interviewed. He said, "Man, what I love about your books, they got all the fluff without the stuff." And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "All these authors, they just make these big thick books and got all this stuff you got to read through to get to the fluff. I mean, all the stuff without the fluff." That's what he said. He said, "Your book's got all the stuff without the fluff." And he said, "Man, I just had to highlight everything." But I wrote it that way on purpose because a lot of people don't like to read books, especially blue collar folks. Some of them never read books, but they like to read my books because they're small and they got little short stories. But the reason I'm telling you about this book though is the first 5 chapters, I'm trying to get a top level leader to want to keep turning the pages. So I talk about the cost of culture, the foundation of culture, the impact of culture, and then the next 2 chapters, 3rd and 4th one, I'm talking about an employer, becoming a sought after employer. And what I say there is that means people outside of our organization have a very strong desire to work inside of our organization. That's the goal most people want. But how do you become a sought after employer? you first got to become, which is chapter 5, you got to become an employer of choice. What that means, the way that I talk about it, is everybody already working in the organization has a very strong desire to keep working in the organization, which means they're going to spread something that I talk about in that book. We all know that word of mouth is the best kind of advertisement you can get. And what I teach people is every single person inside of a company is a culture ambassador. Every time somebody asks them what's it like to work wherever XYZ company, soon as somebody opens their mouth, they're an ambassador for that culture. I mean, I've worked places where me and other people that I worked with would somebody ask me where I work, I tell them, but I say you don't want to work there. I'm working somewhere telling people you don't want to work here. I mean, you ain't gonna get no better negative word of mouth advertised than somebody inside of your company saying I don't want to work there to everybody outside of the company. The other thing a lot of people don't realize, because everything I teach Tots is common sense. Everything I say, everybody nods yes because they already know, but they maybe ain't thought about it deep enough. The other thing related to that, I tell people, if you think that's bad, every single person that's ever worked in your organization is a culture ambassador. Now, I say, any of you out there ever worked somewhere else? People raise their hand. I say, have you ever stopped talking about the company you worked at before, especially if it was bad? Because most people do. They definitely keep talking about the bad experiences, unless they got a high degree of character, and a lot of people don't. And so I say, you ever worked around somebody? Maybe somebody that's sitting beside you right now that works in your organization. Have you ever heard them talk about somewhere they used to work? Everybody knows they can validate that this is what happens. So when a company's trying to become, when I put all this together, that entire book is about how to become the capital the sought after employer of choice in your industry. That's what all the rest of that book is. Those 5 components broke down into what that means relative to cultural transformation. And a lot of times I say, if you're wondering what the people are saying inside your organization, because a lot of times we're speaking to top business owners, sometimes we're speaking to HR folks, organizational development people, sometimes it's multiple levels of leaders within one company. I'll say, now that I'm talking about this, if you're ever curious about wondering now, what are our people saying about our company? I said, I can't tell you literally what they're saying, but I can tell you if it's good or bad or somewhere in between. And I say, all you got to do is, and I said, and you guys already know the answer to this. When you need to fill a position, how hard is it? If it's hard to fill a position with anybody, you got a lot of negative word of mouth advertisement out there. If you got top talent lined up waiting to get in, they can't wait for an opening. And when you get ready to fill a position, you got 10, 20, 30 people, top talent. You can't figure out which one of those 10 is the best. Then everybody's saying good stuff. And it's usually somewhere in the middle. But the challenge is, how hard is it to find people? Because not only is everybody a culture ambassador, but every employee is your best recruiter or your worst. This is another way to see the same thing. So that's just a slightly different spin. A lot of times, I tell people when I'm speaking to HR groups, a lot of times they talk about, especially when the unemployment's low, we just can't find any people because unemployment's low. I say, you believe that? You believe you can't find people because unemployment's low? I said, let me ask you a question. Have you ever hired somebody with a job? They all hired somebody who had a job. They got to turn in a notice and then they come work for you. Yep, we all have. I say, have you ever hired somebody without a job? They just moved here, or they're 18, or they quit, or they got fired, somebody without a job. Everybody usually has hired somebody without a job. I say, so don't miss what I just had you guys tell me. Y'all just told me everybody with a job is available. Everybody without a job is available. Basically, that means 100% of the people that don't work in your organization are potential candidates. So if you can't find people, you got to quit making excuses about whatever's going on out there and start looking in the mirror. What's going on in here? And ask yourself this question: why don't people want to work here? And then get to work on figuring that out and doing something about it. And you ain't gonna have a problem. And I said, let's just say this. Let's say we work in a company and we got 10 competitors in the same region that we work in. Let's just keep it simple. Let's just say every company's got 20 people. I don't just some round simple number. Everybody's got 20 people. And And overall, across the wide area, maybe there is a labor shortage. That's the other thing I hear. Everybody's moaning, groaning. There's a labor shortage, but that's the same. It's just they ain't. Tots is just crazy. So let me tell you what I tell them. So everybody says there's a labor shortage. Let's say I'm doing all the kind of stuff that I help people do. Let's say I'm actually doing that. I'm developing everybody from top to bottom. Entry level people come into my organization. They go through orientation. They got to go through at a minimum 8 hours of personal growth and development to learn what we're doing. They're gonna go through some more once they get hired in, but they got to go through something as part of their orientation. All of the leaders already in the company, all of the people, the sales people, the office people, frontline, everybody's going through development. We've been doing it for a while, and we actually live in it. We have become the sought after employer in our industry. So when we need a person, we get one of the other companies people. There's 10 companies, so that means there's 9 other companies with 20 people. Let's say there was really nobody to go around. We couldn't, none of us 20 collectively, we couldn't, there's no other people to hire. That's never true, but let's say it is. That's what everybody says. As soon as I got an opening, if I'm the only one in my industry doing this, the top talent at these other 9 companies, they already waiting on that opening. So every time I get an opening, they're coming. Now everybody else, these other 9 people, they may be having problems with a labor shortage, but I ain't having that problem. And I got clients like that, and I love hearing them talk about it. And one of them's in the construction industry down in Texas. He was actually my first interview on that Real People Getting Real Results series. He's vice president of construction, and he told me recently that, I think in that interview, he said, I got 20 resumes, top talent waiting on me to make a spot. He said most people around here, they think there's a labor shortage. They can't find people. He said, but when I get one of those top talent people, and then they come in here and see that we really are who we say we are, because who we are is who we attract. We talked about that earlier, about our values and stuff. These people are high impact people with a high degree of character. Once they come in, check it out, and it's all okay, they send out the signal to everybody they know at the last company and the previous company and the other companies, and it's just nonstop. But most people are not doing this, so they can't find people. It's a labor shortage. It's all these excuses. And Myron Golden, he says this, Tots. I love this. He said, blame is the most popular excuse. It's somebody else's fault. People don't want to work here because something going on out there. No. People, if I'm the leader, people don't work here because of the kind of leader I am. There ain't no other answer. The organization is getting the results that it's aligned to get because of who I am as a top leader. And if I don't believe that as a top leader, then somebody else in my company is leading my company, because leadership's influence. And a lot of times someone without a formal position of authority got a lot more influence than someone who does have it.